good with both hands. Hello, my name is Ben Kemper. I am a storyteller here in the Treasure Valley. And it is my great pleasure and privilege to be able to take audiences much like yourself to far-off times and distant places. So I would like to invite all of you to come with me to London in the year 1601. You are all laborers, good working people, masons, seamstresses, shipwrights, carpenters, and you have just gotten off work for today and you have an extra penny in your pocket. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but that penny is a large portion of your daily income. And you, as a citizen of London, in the reign of good Queen Bess, are cultured, and you want to spend that extra penny on a show. What are you going to see? You might walk over to Tyburn if you have a taste for true crime. There you can give your penny to the government and watch the grisly ends of the worst of the worst. Murderers, traitors to the crown, people who deny the Eucharist, and watch them get beheaded and hanged and drawn and quartered and all sorts of nifty things. Or, if you prefer, you can take that penny and go down to the beast pits along the river. And there you can buy an entrance to a bear baiting. See a great big giant bear tied to a stake set in the middle of a pit while rabid dogs are set upon it. Sometimes the bear wins, sometimes the dogs win. It's your basic BSU football game. You can take that penny and you can go all the way across the river to the Globe Theater, where Shakespeare has a new play going up, The Tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. And you like Shakespeare, he's pretty cool. You go over there, anytime you stand in the pit, you are guaranteed to see a story with sword fighting, with romance, with tons and tons of dick jokes. And okay, he's a writer, he's working hard. You've seen one of his comedies, you've seen them all. He does have a tendency to cram in everything at the end. The occasional weird reference so that the lords up in the boxes can show off their fancy education. But you've heard that this play, Hamlet, has a ghost in it. And ghosts are cool. And even more than that, something happens when you spend your penny and go and stand in the pit with your fellow groundlings for 2+ hours. There are moments when the language just clicks and the story comes to life, and what was a half-drunk actor parading across the board suddenly becomes a king or a lover or a poet. And there are moments when the language just takes flight from their lips and tongues, from the word go, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. And here in London, the city that never sleeps, there are moments when you and your fellow groundlings and the lords up in their boxes and even the girls selling fruit and vegetables through the audience pause and turn and listen. And despite all of your life experiences and all of your class distinctions, you are one entity bringing that story to life. Or you could go to a bear baiting and see animals. It's your penny. It's your choice. Now, let's fast forward some 400 years, right here to the Treasure Valley of 30 years ago, when I was just knee-high to a grasshopper. I like to say that I never really had a childhood. I came into the world as a chronologically challenged curmudgeon. And like many curmudgeons, my prickliness was built on a hidden basis of fear. As a child, I was afraid of everything. Dogs, bees, bicycles, asteroids, heights, and depths. And most of all, I was afraid of people, because I could not understand them. They could be cruel one moment and kind the next. They weren't anything like the characters in books or movies that had clear objectives. They were just these horrible, mysterious cryptids that I could not figure out. And so I spent much of my childhood away in the corner with my stuffed animals or my books, and I did not interact with anyone at all. I was that kid, what we would nowadays call on the autistic spectrum, but back then was simply referred to as special. But that changed one day when a professional storyteller named Joy Steiner came to my school. And she opened up a new world for me. I felt like she was the first person to reach out and connect to me directly. And in between her words and my imagination, something was conjured and brought to life in the air between our heads. And even more than that, I could feel her reaching out and connecting to every other kid in the class. These fellow creatures that I had no idea how they functioned beforehand. Now we were all part of one thing. And so I looked at Joy Steiner and I thought to myself, for the first time, for a person outside my family, that is a person that I want to be with. That is a person that I want to get to know. And so I started stalking her as a tiny from event to event to event to event to event. And eventually she cottoned on, and instead of filing out a restraining order, she took me under her wing and taught me the art of storytelling and sent me around the Treasure Valley to schools and libraries and retirement centers, and eventually across the country to festivals, and then internationally to various schools and communes and cults, but that's another tale. And that was how I could connect to people. I still could not understand them, still don't to this day, but I can always say, you know, that reminds me of a story. But some years after that, even though I had taken on storytelling as my profession, I found the theater, and that became my love. Because the theater is like storytelling, but tenfold. Instead of just one teller and an audience, you have a whole cast. And not only them, but the brilliance of the designers who are sketching the story around the performances, and the unseen gods of stage management working magic in the wings, and up to 700 people with you in the audience, all becoming part of one thing. Because a theater needs an audience. It needs you. You can put on a television show or a movie while you do your taxes or your chores. You can pick up a book and put it down at will. You can buy a piece of art and hang it on the wall and it will become invisible. The best musicians in the world can be playing on a street corner and the world will pass them by. But a play demands your attention. It does not work unless it has eyes and ears receiving it. Then it's, without you, we're just a bunch of weird people being weird in a room together. But it is those moments, that connectiveness, that has always resonated with me, that have been the happiest moments of my life. It reminded me of what old Pastor Don at First Congregational United Church of Christ was always sermonizing about on the lazy winter Sundays when I would be in the back pew. Not because I necessarily wanted to be there, but because my family was up on Bogus, and as I told my father repeatedly, Dad, I hate skiing worse than church. So I would sit in the back, very grateful that I was not crashing into a tree, and I would listen to Pastor Don talk about wholeness and community and connectedness. And I never found that in the pews of First Congregational, but I've always found it in a theater wherever it was put up. And sometimes those connections that you make for 2 hours can last for a lifetime. I remember when I was in middle school, the end of my first year, And the drama department got up for a school assembly to put on Dog's Breath Devereaux, the Dastardly Doctor, a melodrama of murderous malpractice. And it was what you would expect a middle school production to be. There were jokes like someone would come on the intercom and say, "Paging Dr. Boyle, Dr. Lance Boyle." And it was delightful and fun, but there was one actor who had my attention riveted. He was playing Dr. Devereaux, the murderous doctor, the schemer, the sleazer, and he was electric. He drew the whole attention of that auditorium to him. He thought on his lines. You could actually hear him say his lines, unlike many of the rest of the cast. And he was an upperclassman named Chris Canfield. I remember crouched in my brown hooded jacket at the back of the auditorium with the other kids in the special class, thinking, that is a person I want to know. That is a person that I want to be friends with. And so I did. Yay me. And I knew Chris for years, and eventually through him I met Dakota, and then through them both I came to know Boise Bard. And I've always loved Boise Bard because between Dakota and Chris and the artists that they bring on, they do Shakespeare right.
Yes!
Yeah! Let's cheer for that. They perform the recipe as written, as they like to say. And the bits that they stick on enhance the story rather than obscure it. And the people that I have met through Boise Bard, the actors and the stage crew, and people like Tiffany who do so much for it. I still don't understand them because I can't, but I really want to. And they're delightful, and they work so hard to bring these shows to you. They open their homes, their wallets, their closets, for the production. I have driven for hours to be able to make a rehearsal. Every time I'm casting a show, I go on bended knee to my employers at my day job to ask for my hours to be cut so that I can give my best to this performance. I have spent a fortune on baked goods the past 2 summers so that Robin Starveling in A Midsummer Night's Dream can have her precious everything bagel. And I know that I'm not the only one. But love isn't enough sometimes. And so I wanted to thank all of you for coming out and spending money to have a good time, but also to support artists like myself, like so many others, so that we can take pride in our work, and so that we can get performance spaces all across the Treasure Valley, so that people from as wide a range as we can gather can see our shows and be moved by them.
Yes.
Yes, let's clap for that. And I know me standing up here as an actor saying, Boise Bard is excellent, it changes lives, is very much, give us your funds if we be friends. And but I'm here to tell you that it works. And they do. I remember our very last performance of Merry Wives of Windsor last summer. We were scheduled to go out and play at a public park in Mountain Home. And on the day in question, we were all caravanning out. We were watching the temperature climb and climb and climb. And we began to think about, wow, it's really hot out there. It's crack an egg and fry it on the sidewalk hot. It's do a long 2-hour strip show out of your costume because it's so sweaty hot. It's our entire audience is going to get heat stroke and be taken away one by one in an ambulance hot. And so at the very last moment, we changed our venue from outside in a public park to inside in a church, the First Congregational United Church of Christ of Mountain Home. And I was very pleased to be back there, walking through the doors. Ah, the smell of the Cold War era coffee maker. So many happy Sunday memories. But while it was comforting to me, it wasn't to many of my classmates, my castmates, some of whom had suffered a great deal at the hands of organized religion, some of whom were scorned because of who they were or who they loved, some of whom practiced tarot like heathen. And they were afraid that we would do this performance before the Mountain Homites, before this congregation, and we would get to the first dick joke, and they would all rise up and grab us at the stake at the barbecue pit in the backyard. And I wanted to reach out and say, hey friends, no, be not afeared. These are Congregationalists. I know them of old. They could not get the gumption to organize a And we did the show, and people came, and it was wonderful. That whole audience that had come out braving a blistering hot day sat in the church and laughed and gasped and wondered what's going to happen next, as though this play wasn't 400 years old. High school. They were there with us, and something was created in the air above our heads. And so, I want to thank you again for allowing such things to be possible, for us to reach out into faraway communities and give them the gift of a good performance and receive the gift of their kindness and attention. And we cannot do that without you, as an audience and as hopefully very generous donors. So, I will encourage you to give wisely of your pennies. Look at all these beautiful things. Make sure that Chris and Dakota get absolutely shellacked in time. And I know there are a lot of people here, and perhaps you came out of curiosity or obligation. And I want to say that if theater is just not your thing, and you haven't been moved by my story tonight, there will be a bear baiting in the